This is the most pivotal episode in Breaking Bad where the protagonist Walter begins to actively defy his destiny. Imagine a man middle-aged, burdened by life, with elderly parents above and young children below, who was diagnosed with lung cancer at a time when his family needs him the most. As the pillar of the household, what he is most concerned about is naturally his wife and children. He thinks that even if he dies, he must strive to ensure that his wife and children live a life free from want. From then on, an honest and diligent chemistry teacher steps onto a path of no return, which seems to be the only choice given by fate. The reason Breaking Bad is so compelling is that it brilliantly captures Walter's psychological journey in the face of desperate circumstances, making it seem like everyone can see a bit of themselves in this series. In the previous episode, Walter decides to undergo chemotherapy so as not to worry his wife, but his strong pride prevents him from accepting help from the Elliott couple, so he seeks out Jesse, hoping they can collaborate again. Learning from the lessons of their first partnership, Walter lays down 3 rules with Jesse, stating that he will only handle the back-end operations while Jesse takes full responsibility for the business side. Finally, Walter sets his bottom line: no matter what happens, there must be no more bloodshed or violence. However, what Walter doesn't know is that the path he has chosen often leads to situations beyond one's control. After watching, you realize how a person's moral boundaries are breached step by step. The scene shifts to the hospital where Skyler carefully looks after Walter, who is on N4 drip. Walter insists he can take care of himself and asks her to go home to cook for their son. Before leaving, Skyler doesn't forget to ask if Walter received financial help from Elliott. Walter lies, saying he has already received it and has taken care of it by depositing the money in the bank, so his wife need not worry. Skyler is overjoyed to hear that Walter has accepted assistance from others, but what she doesn't know is that the money was earned by Walter himself. From then on, Walter becomes a master of time management. He teaches at school during the day and goes to the outskirts to pursue his contraband production after school. Due to the side effects of chemotherapy, Walter suddenly feels dizzy and struggles to get out of the car. Seeing this, Jesse quickly goes to help and supports Walter to sit down and rest for a while. However, when Walter unbuttons his shirt, Jesse sees the red spots on Walter's chest and realizes for the first time that Walter has lung cancer. Jesse relates this to his aunt's symptoms, mentioning that she passed away in pain 7 months after starting chemotherapy. Jesse finally resolves his confusion, realizing that Walter is in this business to ensure his family is financially secure before he dies. Feeling that his current state no longer allows him to continue working, Walter asks Jesse to help finish the remaining work. Although Jesse was somewhat lacking in confidence, Walter still encouraged him, saying you can do it. Jesse feels deep sympathy for Walter's plight and works hard at night to stealthily distribute the goods. To make it easier to stay in touch with Walter, Jesse thoughtfully bought him a cell phone and then handed over Walter's share of the money. Because it's retail, Jesse's sales are far from meeting Walter's expectations. Seeing that the profits are completely disproportionate to the risks he's taking, Walter becomes anxious and demands that Jesse find a way to expand their distribution channels, like dealing in wholesale quantities. However, Jesse, who has been in this line of work for years, knows the rules. The only dealer he knew, Crazy 8, is already dead. The one who took over Crazy 8's clients is a fierce Mexican dealer who won't do business without a familiar reference. Walter, unfamiliar with these rules, doesn't understand this. Jesse urges Walter to be content, noting that they're already making more money than in a regular job. Hearing this, Walter becomes furious, accusing Jesse of being too timid. Feeling helpless, Jesse didn't dare to argue because he also understood Walter's predicament. He not only had to bear the high medical costs but also needed to earn enough money for his family in a limited amount of time. As he sees the numbers on the bills dwindling, Walter finds himself out of options. The side effects of chemotherapy cause Walter to vomit daily. One day, while Walter was rinsing his mouth in the restroom, the kind-hearted janitor Hugo noticed Walter enduring the agony of his illness and kindly offered him a piece of his own gum. Back in the classroom, Walter is packing up to go home from work when Hank pays a surprise visit. It turned out that the gas masks they had found earlier were identified as belonging to Walter's school lab. Since Walter was there, Hank came to investigate. Walter pretended to know nothing about it. When Hank mentioned that Crazy 8 was an informant for the DEA and had been missing for many days, he suspected Crazy 8 had been killed by someone else. Walter struggled to hide his inner panic. Hank asked Walter if he had lost any gas masks, to which Walter said no. Hank asked to check the lab inventory and Walter had no reason to stop him, so they went to the lab together. Hank inquired who else had keys to the lab. Walter truthfully answered that the science teachers, the vice principal, and the janitor all had keys. After a careful check, It turned out that 2 gas masks and several glass containers were missing, exactly the kind of equipment needed for contraband. At that moment, the cell phone Jesse bought for Walter rang. Walter was going to not answer it, but Hank strongly urged him to pick up the phone because Hank was worried it might be Skylar. Walter had no choice but to move as far from Hank as possible to take the call. It turned out Jesse was calling to bring good news. His friend Skinny had been cellmates with Tuco and Skinny could vouch for him to broker a deal with Tuco. After hanging up, Walter pretended it was the doctor who had called. Hank had no suspicions of Walter and reminded him to keep an eye on his own turf. However, Hank's next comment sent shivers down Walter's spine.
We don't want people to start wondering about you, man.
What Hank never expected was that his joke was actually the reality. Meanwhile, Skinny took Jesse to meet with Tuco for the deal, but Tuco's territory was heavily guarded and getting to see him required going through several checks. Finally, they got to meet Tuco himself. Skinny went up to greet him, but Tuco completely ignored him. It seemed their relationship was not as good as Skinny had boasted. In an awkward moment, Skinny introduced Jesse to Tuco and Jesse took out the product he had brought. Tuco used a dagger to pick up a piece and then crushed it. The always cautious Tuco insisted Jesse try it first. After seeing there was no problem, Tuco tried it too, and indeed it was a masterpiece in the contraband world, exciting Tuco immensely with just one taste. Tuco asked Jesse where this came from. Jesse answered truthfully, but Tuco didn't believe him, and then Tuco told them to leave without any intention of paying. Seeing that Tuco completely disregarded Skinny, Jesse picked up his product and tried to escape but was quickly stopped by Tuco's man. Seeing the high purity of the product Jesse brought, Tuco took a bag of money from the safe and told Jesse to come and get it. Jesse cautiously went to take the money thinking he was about to succeed, but instead he was brutally beaten by Tuco. Tuco was truly ruthless in his attack, and it didn't take long for him to leave Jesse gasping for breath, declaring that no one but himself could do business there. This made Skinny finally understand his own position. Early the next morning, Hank came to Walter's school and took Hugo away while he was raising the flag, which was also seen by Walter, who had just arrived at the school. That evening when Hank came to play poker at his house, Walt Jr. was puzzled about Hugo's arrest that morning, thinking Hugo was a nice person, but Hank explained that Hugo had a criminal record and also had a key to the lab, making him the prime suspect in the theft of the lab equipment. The DEA also took this opportunity to search Hugo's car and house, and although they found a small amount of contraband, they did not find the missing equipment. Walter defended Hugo, saying he didn't seem like someone who would steal, but Hank advised him that this has nothing to do with personal feelings. It's hard to tell at first glance who is committing a crime. Ironically, this statement seems to speak to Hank himself, who because of his personal feelings really didn't see right away that Walter was committing a crime. Hank urged Walter to hurry up and place his bet, deciding to follow the bet himself. Everyone else thought their cards were too poor and folded, leaving only Walter and Hank in the showdown. This also symbolized their real-world struggle, with Hank investigating the case in the open while Walter continued his crimes in secret.
Dude, you bad, horrible liar. You smoking there, huh?
Walter pushed all his chips in, indicating he was ready to confront Hank to the end. Hank's statement also exactly described the real Walter, but Hank has no idea what's going on in Walter's mind. He guessed Walter must have got the big card with the hearts, because in Hank's mind Walter was never one to bluff, so he decisively folded. Walter won all the bets. Marie was speechless when she saw Hank's AK. Then she looked at Walter's tiny 2 and 7 of spades, which symbolized that Walter's heart was gradually darkening, and even Hank was no match for him. This perfect combination of classic dialogue and plot is precisely the charm of this show. After everyone left, Walter couldn't get in touch with Jesse. After taking a shower, he tried again, but this time it was Skinny who answered the phone, saying Jesse had been beaten and was now in the hospital. Walter rushed to the hospital and saw Jesse unconscious on the bed, which made him furious. He demanded that Skinny tell him everything he knew about Tuco. He decided to confront Tuco himself. Back at home, Walter saw his hair almost gone, so he decided to shave it all off. When Skylar saw the bald Walter, she was nearly taken aback, but Walter appeared very calm as his recent experiences had left him unshaken. He came to Tuco's place and he brought a bag of what looked like contraband. After going through several layers of checks, Walter finally met Tuco in person.
What's your name?
Heisenberg.
From then on, Walter officially started using the alias Heisenberg to make his mark in the contraband world. Tuco asked him his purpose for coming. Walter immediately demanded $50,000, $35,000 for the product Tuco had stolen and $15,000 as compensation for Jesse's medical expenses. Tuco laughed at Walter, calling him crazy, saying, "You an old man with no weapons come here asking for money, and even more ridiculously you bring a bag of contraband with you." However, the next second Walter taught Tuco a lesson.
This is not meth.
In the chaos, Walter quickly took away a bag of explosives and Tuco and his men dared not make a move. Seeing that Heisenberg was about to die with him, Tuco had to give him money to go and said that the last shipment Jesse had brought in had been a big seller and he asked Walter to bring him another pound next week. Walter took the opportunity to raise the stakes, demanding a 2-pound minimum order, which Tuco agreed to quickly.
As long as we got an understanding.
1 pound is not gonna cut it. You have to take 2.
Tuco realized Heisenberg was talented and decided to work with him long-term. Walter, having triumphed, returned to his car and looking at the money he had earned through his courage, he let out a shout. A thrill he had never experienced before. When his emotions calmed down, a slight evil smile appeared on Walter's face. From then on, Walter boldly walked the edge of the law, officially stepping onto the path of becoming the notorious dealer Heisenberg. Even when the DEA investigated the missing lab equipment at the school, Walter showed no fear. He even flirted with Skylar in public. This was in stark contrast to the once honest and dutiful Walter. Skylar's cooperation emboldened him even further, and after the meeting they had an intimate exchange in the car audaciously next to a police vehicle.
Where did that come from? And why was it so damn good?
Because it was illegal.
The evolved Walter continuously challenged the boundaries of law and morality. The next day, a refreshed Walter went to visit the injured Jesse, but he was greeted by a real estate agent instead. Because Crazy 8 and Emilio died in that house, Jesse, worried it was haunted, planned to sell it. Jesse, having heard from Skinny that Walter had asked for Tuco's address, assumed Walter was planning revenge. Seeing Walter alive, Jesse was relieved he hadn't gone to confront Tuco, or he would have surely been killed by Tuco. However, Walter handed Jesse the money he got from Tuco and announced that he had already formed a partnership with Tuco. Hearing this, Jesse, ignoring his pain, stood up immediately, unable to understand why Walter would contract with the murderous Tuco. Moreover, they had to supply 2 pounds of product a week, which was impossible because they couldn't get that much raw material. The time for the first deal with Tuco came and Walter chose an abandoned car factory for the transaction. They both wore sunglasses to hide their fear of Tuco. Jesse mocked Walter's choice of location, saying it was a novice's choice. Real criminals would choose busy urban areas. He patiently explained the details of the deal to Walter. Soon Tuco's car approached them. Seeing Jesse's nervous and frightened look, Walter told him to hide and said he could handle it alone, but Jesse disagreed.
I'm no pussy.
After getting out of the car, Tuco first apologized for beating Jesse, saying, "To work with me you've got to pay some price," and didn't forget to mock Walter's choice of location, urging him to hurry up with the delivery. However, when Walter only brought out half a pound of the product, Tuco immediately became unhappy. Walter quickly explained there had been a production issue. Although Tuco gave him the money, he deducted $500 for Walter's breach of contract. Walter was just about to retort when Tuco's aura overpowered him. After humiliating Walter, Tuco turned to leave, but Walter stopped him. Walter greedily demanded Tuco prepay for next week's product, confident in the quality of his product and certain Tuco wouldn't refuse. Jesse looked at Walter in surprise. After some bargaining, they finally reached an agreement. Seeing his plan succeed, Walter boldly set even higher terms.
Can you handle 4 pounds?
Listen, old man. Talk is talk. But owing me money? That's bad.
After they left, Walter hurriedly picked up the money from the ground while Jesse thought Walter was simply crazy. Seeing that they couldn't even produce 2 pounds of the product, Walter agreed to provide 4 pounds, which Jesse thought was an impossible task. Yet Walter calmly wrote down a list, as he had already planned to change his method of making contraband. Hearing about Walter's plan B, Jesse looked at him with admiration. Walter then handed the meticulously prepared list to Jesse and asked him to go purchase these materials. Seeing the list, Jesse was completely baffled. He had never seen those items before, let alone knew how to procure them, so he thought about giving up. However, Walter immediately squashed any such thoughts in Jesse.
Is the first day of the rest of your life. What are you doing?
This is the first day of the rest of your life, but what kind of life will it be, huh? Will it be a life of fear, of, oh, no, I can't do this, of never once believing in yourself?
I don't know.
Listen, these things, we need them, and only you.
Seeing Walter's confidence in him, Jesse, who always craved recognition, found it impossible to refuse. The scene shifts to Skylar hosting a baby shower for her unborn daughter, facing a pile of gifts from friends. Skylar opened each one and expressed her gratitude publicly. She was most surprised by the luxury tiara that her sister Marie had given. Skylar made polite comments about not needing to spend so much, but she was secretly thrilled. Seeing Marie happy, Hank on the other hand couldn't feel the same joy. Could it be he was upset about Marie spending so much on her sister? The depressed Hank dragged Walter out for a drink and even took out a box of cigars from his pocket to relieve his boredom. Unexpectedly, Walter, who never smoked, insisted on having one too. When Walter mentioned that these were illegal, Hank said that sometimes the forbidden fruit is the sweetest. Walter took this opportunity to gauge Hank's attitude towards illegal activities, but Hank's stance was zero tolerance. This meant that the relationship between Hank and Walter would inevitably break down sooner or later. That night, Skylar was still puzzled about why Marie would give such an expensive gift. Compared to diapers and baby formula, she needed these more, so she decided to exchange the tiara Marie had given her for cash. Walter took this opportunity to tell his wife he had found a treatment for lung cancer that required him to spend the weekend out of town. Skylar, having no suspicions, gladly agreed. These 2 days Walter could finally focus on making contraband with Jesse. Seeing Jesse had prepared everything he needed, Walter praised him for doing a great job. After Walter's careful inspection, he found they were still missing a crucial ingredient, methylamine. Jesse said this was hard to get as the raw materials were locked up in a warehouse in the south of the city. He had planned to hire some thieves to retrieve it, but the warehouse was heavily guarded and frequently locked, and the thieves asked for a high price, so he refused because Jesse had almost spent all his money on the other materials. That's when Walter saw a magnetic drawing board nearby and had a bold idea.
So why don't we just steal it ourselves?
Yeah? How are we gonna do that?
With this?
Soon they collected a bunch of these boards, and Walter gathered the iron filings from them and added a certain proportion of aluminum powder, creating a batch of ingredients for a thermite reaction. Jesse listened dumbfounded as Walter once again demonstrated the power of knowledge. That night the two timed their move perfectly, ready to act. Seeing the ski masks Walter had prepared, Jesse complained that they were too ugly, but they had no choice but to make do. Then Jesse cut through the wire fence and they sneaked in, nearly getting caught by a patrolling guard. Seeing the guard was heading to the restroom, they quickly tied the door shut with rope, then they hurried to the warehouse door. Next was the moment to witness a miracle. Walter ignited the device, and with a burst of sparks and lightning the door was successfully opened. Due to the illegal intrusion, the alarm automatically went off, leaving the guard trapped in the restroom, completely baffled. However, when they entered the warehouse, they found there were no small barrels, and reluctantly they had to use all their strength to move a large barrel. The next day they planned to drive out to the countryside to start work, but unfortunately the RV broke down at a crucial moment, so they had to start working in Jesse's basement. With Walter's improved formula, their efficiency greatly increased, and they were even able to exceed their target. After their efforts, they were finally able to consistently produce large quantities of the product, meaning they would make a lot of money. Jesse asked Walter how much money he needed given his current situation. Walter hadn't really calculated it. With his current ambition, he just wanted as much as possible. Just then Jesse suddenly noticed someone approaching in the yard outside the window. It turned out to be the real estate agent showing the house. Walter peered out through the door crack, fortunately seeing only a clueless little girl. Walter asked Jesse to quickly find a way to get these people to leave, then he continued his work. Jesse stormed up from the basement and bluntly told them the house was no longer for sale, then he shooed everyone out. Meanwhile, Skylar went to the jewelry store intending to return the gift that Marie had given her. The store owner asked her to provide the receipt, but Skylar explained that it was a gift from someone else and she didn't have one. Seeing this, the owner called over an employee to watch Skylar while she phoned the police, leaving an innocent Skylar completely baffled. It turned out that the item was stolen merchandise from the store. Despite Skylar's insistent denials that she had never stolen anything, the owner didn't believe her and insisted she explain herself to the police. In a crucial moment, Skylar used her status as a pregnant woman to throw a tantrum and threaten them, successfully making her escape. An angry Skylar immediately called Marie, demanding she come over and explain herself right away. It turns out that Marie has a habit of stealing. When she bought the shoes earlier, she naturally left the old ones in the shop and left with the new ones as if nothing had happened. When Skylar received Marie's gift, she said this: "Marie always finds the best wrapping paper." These were all hints at Marie's habit of stealing. Hank obviously knew about his wife's bad habit, which was exactly why he had that speechless expression at Skylar's daughter's party. So he took Walter out to drown his sorrows in alcohol. Marie, knowing her behavior had been discovered by her sister, initially tried to avoid her, but eventually Skylar found her. Faced with her sisters questioning, Marie flatly denied everything. Faced with Marie's attitude, a frustrated Skylar angrily left. 2 days later, Walter returned home and his wife asked how his retreat went. Skylar also noticed a strange smell on him, but Walter deflected it naturally. Then Skylar shared the incident about Marie stealing the tiara. However, Walter showed sympathy for Marie, saying that sometimes people do illegal things for their family. Actually, he was testing Skylar's attitude towards such incidents, hoping if his wife discovered his secret, she might choose to forgive him while also seeking some psychological comfort for his own crimes. This is a typical psychological state in the progressive development of criminal behavior, but Skylar believed that Walter would never do such things, which meant she could never accept Walter's actions. They were definitely heading for a big confrontation. The next day, Walter still chose the abandoned car factory to trade with Tuco, this time bringing enough product. Due to the change in the formula, this batch of product was blue, but Walter assured that its purity was even higher than before. Tuco tried it and immediately got excited. Tuco swiftly handed the money to Heisenberg, and because they were half a pound over, Tuco quickly instructed his men to top up the payment. Getting such top quality product made Tuco very happy, and he stood to make a good profit from it. Seeing the boss so happy, the side of the younger brother rushed to kiss his arse.
Just remember who you're working for.
Unexpectedly, this comment directly enraged Tuco, as he felt his underling was stealing his lines. Seeing they were about to start fighting, Walter urged Tuco to relax a bit, as he didn't want to see any violence.
Heisenberg says, relax. Orale, Holmes. I'm relaxed. I'm relaxed. I'm relaxed.
The subordinate never expected his attempt to ingratiate himself would backfire so badly, a scene that left Walter and Jesse dumbfounded. Tuco was so ruthless with his own man, a typical example of making an example out of someone. By sacrificing a subordinate, he instilled fear in Heisenberg. Tuco had calculated this move very clearly. With this, the first season of Breaking Bad comes to an end. At least in this season, Walter's initial intent to make contraband hasn't changed. In the later episodes, Walter will become increasingly worse, and the oppressive feeling towards others will also strengthen. But this self-sacrificial motive gives the audience a touching first impression, so even when Walter does many bad things later, it feels like he has his reasons, which is one of the most successful aspects of the show. It's a pity that many people give up due to the slow pace of the first season, because the more exciting story is yet to come.